Welcome to the Success Pick and Mix podcast. I'm your host, Nicky Raby, a professional pick and mixer. I'm a personal brand coach, a speaker, an actor, a creator, and a podcaster. I'm on a mission to help you find and create your version of success. Your pick and mix of life and business on your terms. A blend that complements your personality, your goals, and your circumstances. Since 2018, I've been sharing interviews and mini episodes to help you unlock your next step, to make it real and make it happen. Round here, we dream big. We go for the ideal version. We talk about money and make moves our future selves would be proud of. This podcast is free and available for you whenever you need it. So do rate, review, and subscribe for new episodes. If you want to go deeper with my support, check out my freebies house and unlock the rooms you choose. nickyraby.com/freebies house. I also have workshops, programs, and one-on-one bespoke offerings. For prices and availability, go to nickyraby.com. Thank you, as always, for spending some time with me and my guests. Now, on to today's episode. In today's episode, I interviewed Dodd, who I adore, if it's not clear from the episode. We chatted for absolute yonks because there was so much to say. I mean, we talk about money, we talk about women, we talk about the 90s, we talk about moving into new spaces and new places. We talk about giving ourselves permission for what it is that we want and who we are in the world. And it's a juicy one. It's a juicy one. And it's a conversation that I won't forget for a while. And even though I recorded it this morning, there have been so many times during today where I've gone, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. So I hope you have some of those light bulb moments as well. If you do, share them with Ray and I. If you like the podcast, you are also welcome to buy me a coffee. I don't charge for this podcast and there's no sponsorship or anything like that. So if you want to show your appreciation or if you got something from today and you want to do that, the link is down below. Obviously, no pressure. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I loved recording it, and do subscribe for updates, etc. You know what to do. I'll see you on the other side. Bye. Ray, welcome to the podcast. I'm so happy that you're here and that we are wearing patterns and lipstick and it's Friday and we're good to go. Thanks for being here.
Of course, I'm so happy to be here. First of all, I just love to talk to people, but also I've known of you for so long from various communities we're in, so it's really lovely to see your invite and to
and it's so nice just to chat in real life. And like I always, I want to DM people, but we've got so much to say anyway. Yes. So if people don't know you, I'm sure they will, but tell us a bit about your business, what you do, what you're doing, what you're cooking at the moment.
So I'm a money and business coach, and I am often described as not your average money coach. That's how people have, that was somebody else described me as that a long time ago. And I was like, well, I'm taking that because that works really well.
That's on a mouse mat.
Yeah, exactly. And so my approach to money, I guess, is I actually find it a bit sad that it's still so different, because I've been doing this I've been doing the money coaching thing for 5 years. I've been coaching for about 7, nearly 8, which I interviewed Lucy Sheridan on my podcast yesterday. I was describing her nicely as an internet grandma and me as like an internet great aunt, because I feel like it's like actually been a long time now.
Yeah, 10 internet years as well. I'm like a decade.
So you'd be in the grandma section as well then.
Yeah. I mean, just cart me out now. I'm done. That's it.
It's like we've been there, we've watched stuff come and go. And I think when I first started talking about money, and just to very quickly say it, what I do is I put money in more of a societal context. So it's less about individual responsibility, although of course that's a big element of it. but it's putting it in the context of like all your feelings about money make perfect sense in the context of the society we live in. There is not, and this is a game I like to play, there has never been anything a client said to me and I've gone, yeah, that's totally on you. Like it's always, I'm like, well, yeah, that makes sense because of this with the patriarchy, or this with white supremacy, or this with this, or this capitalism, and blah 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 blah, all those isms and stuff. So it does make me a bit sad in a way to say that it's the way I approach it. I am not the only one that does it that way, but it is still more unusual for people to talk about money in the way I talk about it. So that's why I'm described often as not your average money coach, because it's less about pull yourself up by the, I was going to say by the jock strap. Like, don't pull yourself up by the jock strap. I don't know where that came from, but pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
When I went to drama school, this is a very weird aside, but the boys had to wear jock straps for dance and then an all-in-one unitard, and these were so expensive, and we had to be in alphabetical order because again it was some weird thing. We used to do these side stretches, but a guy had a rip that down one of them, so on one side it was fine, like and 4 3, and then he'd turn over. I was like, oh my eyes.
Did you do that thing though where you had to keep checking it was still what it was? Like you can't look away.
I could not stop. So going back to the business side of things, the money conversation, did it find you? Was it like a moment of, Ray, you are the one, and you're like, oh no, don't make me, yeah, it was a moment of, Ray, you are the one. No, absolutely not. Avoided it for a year, and then I was like, I presume I can swear fully. I was like, all the best ones.
What? Oh no! Like, so basically, what happened was I started my business in 2016. I think coaching was 2016.
Yeah,
and we were in a very, very tricky money spot at the time. And I always want to like express this fully and say, not just like, oh, things are a bit tight. Like I couldn't afford groceries. I had 2 children. One was about a year, one was about 3, and they were asking me for snacks, like as children do, and I was opening the cupboards and going, there's no food and no money, and I don't know. I would have to call family members and be like, could you drop some shopping over? I don't have enough money to buy food. So we were, and I talk about, like on my podcast, there's a number of episodes of me talking about how that happened. But I started my business. I'd already running a hypnobirthing business, and then I wanted to do this coaching stuff. And I started that business in a kind of like, I have to do something. And it really helped me get over my own shit. Like I was someone who had a lot of real low self-esteem, a lot of like loathing of like, certainly in terms of like visibility and stuff like that. Like I did not like myself, or even thinking about it now, it's so different to how I feel about myself now. It's interesting to just feel like 2 different people. So I started off my business and it went bananas super fast. So I made 94 grand in the first year, kind of by accident, didn't really know how that had happened. And so what I did is I decided to teach a course on money to teach people like what I'd done, mostly like less about like the strategies and stuff, and more about like, I used to feel like this because I'm someone who used to never look at my bank balance. I didn't check my bank balance for about 4 years, ever. Just left it all to my husband, which was partly what got us in the situation that we got into. And so I was really like pathologically avoidant of money. And then I'd gone from that to this like business just absolutely taking off. And so I decided to teach a course. I'm trying to remember what it was called now. I think it was called The Magic of Recognizing Your Worth, something like that. And loads of people signed up to it. We got ourselves in a Facebook group, and I was like, whoa, what is this?
The internet is real.
Yeah. But people's feelings about money were just like, oh, and it was so much. And I'd run e-course, like that's how I'd made the money, was running various programs. And but this was my first focus on money. And I was like, wow, I've opened a can of worms. And I loved it. I was like, wow, there's so much to say about this. And I sort of realized at that point, I was like, I think I want to focus on money, but oh my God, I can't be a money coach. Like I'm already a coach.
Do I have to get a royal blue suit? Do I have to, does it have to be shiny?
I have to have a blow dry like once a week and like you know, have my photos taken on the beach, just kicking a wave. Like, I just was like, oh no. Oh. And so I then, at the time I was working with mums in business, that was my kind of niche. I really outgrew that because people kept contacting me and being like, do I have to be a mum? I really love your stuff. And I was like, no, actually you don't. This is not specific to you, just mums, even though that was an aspect. And so I opened that up and I called myself a taking up space mentor, which cracks me up now because I was literally mentoring myself to take up the space of being a money coach. And then I had, the moment you described where I was like, shit, I'm a money coach. I have to do this now.
Yeah.
And I've owned
that
it
story of being in that early stages of motherhood and going, how am I actually going to do this? Because like, this is very reminiscent. My boy is about to turn 8 and I can see myself and visualize myself of like being 9 months pregnant, and I had a nearly 10-pound baby and just rolling, like all of this sort of time of year is very prevalent, but I didn't really have a plan of what I was going to do work-wise. Like, I was a coach and I had things cooking, but I had no idea what impact that would be in terms of finances and how you have to rework your business and your hours and all of the stuff. And everybody around you is telling you how lucky you are to be a mum. And of course you are, but you're so bloody tired and deranged. It's so many thoughts and feelings. And
shocked.
So shocked. And they're looking at you like, what are we doing? Like, I don't know, mate. We're gonna figure it out.
We're gonna try.
There's so many pictures of me and him just like sitting in the bed, like, here we are, what we're doing. So how did that process happen to, I guess, where you are today, and how have you made those moves in terms of your business, where you have got to that point where you go, I'm good, I know I'm off, I've got that momentum, things are moving, shaking? What sort of things did you put in place that gave you those moments of, let's go?
So I think one of the things that happened, it's funny with like talking about children, is like I had a really deep story about giving up on things, that I was flaky, and that like, so I'd had loads of, I think I'd always wanted to run my own business. Like, I had a perfume stall, like, where I went around my estate when I was a kid, like selling like flower petal perfume door to door, like, you know, stuff like that. Like, and then I was particularly was really into vintage clothes and have always been really into clothes. And so my plan had been, like, I got made redundant from a job that I'd done for 10 years in London and just wasn't anything I was ever particularly interested in. I went through phases of liking it, but really it wasn't my space at all. And then my plan was to run like a vintage shop. And I just had, like you said, I had no idea that was not going to work for me with a kid. Like, how was I going to go? I thought he could just come along while I went and got stuff, and that just was not the reality at all.
Because you see these beautiful images of babies in sling, and my baby like looked like he was going to work when he was born. He was so massive. I was like, I can't carry you like that on my front. You're gonna have to go in a buggy, mate. I can't do it.
I had one that was a good sling baby, and I had one that walked when he was 8 months old.
Oh,
and it was horrific. It was horrific.
Anyone got no sense at that point.
No sense, honestly. And he's tiny, so he looked like a 5-month-old just walking around. And he just climbed everything. He used to race around our dining room table just over and over again. And everyone was like, just get him off. I was like, I do get him off, but he gets back up. And if he falls off, he goes and gets back on again. It was exhausting.
And some people would be like, wow, that mum's really competitive. Look how early she's made her child walk.
I was like, stay in the sling, like tighten it harder. But he didn't care.
And I think there are those moments where you slide down a radiator, you have a big cry, and you're like, this is not going to work. And I was saying this to somebody earlier, is that sometimes in those moments you can live in that moment of like, why me? Almost go into that victim in that story, like, I think I've messed it all up, and it's so much shame and all of that stuff. Or you can say, well, what am I going to do next then?
So this was me forever, oh God, I can't, like, I still describe it as almost just like giving over to my self-doubt, like very physically going, oh, I've tried and I can't. And then what happened with this business, like, so I gave birth to Stan. It was a really hard birth. And then we had a really hard breastfeeding journey as well. Like really hard. And one of the reasons that I then became a breastfeeding counselor and a hypnobirthing teacher was off the back of what had happened. But one of the things that happened, even though my birth with Stan was hard, breastfeeding was honestly even harder, I didn't give up. I do say to myself, you couldn't really give up, right? Like mid-birth, even though I literally said, he was like crowning, and I was saying to the midwife, like, I want a cesarean now, I've changed my mind. And
this
they were like, yes,
vehicle is reversing.
Yeah, I was like, I don't want to do it. But I know I couldn't physically give up the birth, really, but it felt like I could, and I kept in it and did it. Yeah. And I was so amazed with myself. I was like, wow, that was really hard, and you did it. And then with the breastfeeding, I think the birth kind of helped me be like, no, I'm not giving up on this. And I possibly should have done it stages. Like, it was really difficult, but I didn't. And so that was the first time where I was like, I committed to this thing and I've seen it through. And it really changed how I thought of myself in so many ways. And then when it came to this situation we were in our lives, like a money situation, and I had this idea that I felt really like I had that. The other thing I think that motherhood can do is activate that intuitive knowingness in you. Like, you can feel like you're more in contact with that. And I definitely felt that. And I felt like, I think I need to do this. I had this deep sense that I still have. I was like, I think I'm meant to make a lot of money. And it had never occurred to me before that was available to me. I don't come from money. I come from my parents were very religious, and I come from a family where it was a lot of like, we would pray, but really would announce to the church that we needed money, and then money would come in. And it was very much that kind of like situation where we very much lived in that like support of the church. My parents worked, but they didn't earn very much. And so we live like, I just didn't think that I could create money for myself. That wasn't my experience. And so there was just this, like having a kid and a moment of like, I think I know who I am more now. And I think I was meant to do this. And that was the beginning of, and also the fact that we had no money meant I had to get over a lot of my shit. So where I was scared of being visible, I also knew that worked, and my family needed to eat.
That like a habit, just going, right, okay, so I guess this is what I'm doing then. And and I'm going to be there. So
right. Completely. So it was a time when Facebook Lives had just started happening. And so I, in my hypnobirthing business, had gone live a lot. And I always tell this story of the kids were like, I don't know, but I think maybe about 1 and 3. And I was doing a live and I was holding my laptop on a live talking about like, I don't know, induction or something. And I was trying to hide the fact that what I'd actually done is put my kids in front of Paw Patrol in order to be able to do this live. And then Stan was like, Mommy, I need a new episode. And I was like, oh, everyone can hear this. And I was like, well, and I remember, I remember it being like, it's slow-mowing almost, and being like, well, I have 2 choices here. Either I can acknowledge that this is the truth of what's happening, or I can do you remember that BBC like guy that was on the news who tried to hide his children, and then his wife like slides in,
scuttled in, didn't she?
I was like, that didn't go very well for him. I'm probably not going to do that. So I was like, sorry everybody, I just need to help Stan out with this. I was like, Stan, here you go. And I just like held the laptop and chatted to him, blah 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 blah, and carried on. And I started to do that more, and I started to get more and more people booking with me, because they were like, I love the way we get to see how you actually are. I love the way that you don't pretend that you're not doing certain things, and you just like invite us in. And it just clicked that real visibility, not polished visibility, which is, we see more of that real visibility now, but I think still people are still aiming for the polished a lot of the time. Instagram's got that more polished vibe sometimes. The real visibility sells. It makes people feel like they trust you. That's why I love podcasts, because you're just getting us chatting. And this is like, we were chatting before you pressed record. It's not that different to how we're chatting now. And so I kind of committed to doing that, and I started to really love it. And I started to, and I will admit this, I still do this, watch back my own lives and start to really like myself. Because I got to see myself in 3D motion rather than just photos where I was like, oh God, I don't look nice there, or my double chin, whatever. I was just like, oh, this is what people get to see. This is me in like motion, is a very different experience. And someone once asked me, when I was doing my Facebook group the most and going live, like most days, I wouldn't do that like consistently, but I'd go through months of like every day, and then I'd burn myself out and be like, oh, I can't speak for a while.
And
I've learned to like manage it. Yeah, I've learned to manage it more now. But I remember someone saying to me, like, how do you just show up every day? Like, are you not worried about what people think? And I was like, well, if I was to tell myself the story that they think I'm terrible and I'm no good, I'd be making that up, because I'm not getting that feedback from people. It's not that every live I'm getting like, you know, oh my God, you're amazing. Like, I was getting bits of that, but I wasn't getting that like endlessly. I was like, if I was to think those things, that would be a story I was making up. So why don't I just make up a positive story for myself, that they like it, or they can leave?
Yes.
And you get that, like, they can go, they can leave the Facebook group. Yeah, they can leave the live. Like, they'll go. They won't like this woman wanging on about whatever, and that's fine. But I'm not going to beat myself up with like, I have these incredible storytelling powers. We all do. Why don't I create a positive story for myself for once? Having spent, I guess at that point, like 33, 34 years creating a very different one for myself. Why don't I use some of that for good?
And there comes a point, I think, in all our lives where I'm just like, I'm so bored. There was a story I figured out the other day. It was 30 years since I started secondary school. And I was like, wow, those stories are so old. Why am I holding on to that person? And just to go back on what you were saying about that visibility of showing up imperfectly, I often think about those shops on the high street that they have to open their doors and say, come on in. And there's often, especially if you go in, you know, if I go in a local shop after the school run, there might be a Henry Hoover, like, sorry, I'm just having a bit of a clear up. Like, it's all right. I just literally need to buy a card for a birthday present or whatever. And there's no judgment there. And I think sometimes there's this conversation around, because you're online, or again, maybe you're talking to women, or it's a thing you're running around your business. It's like not a real business. And it's, and it,
just rage face.
For those who are listening on the podcast, Ray did a rage face. It's those moments where it's like, no, we're actually doing this, and we're making excellent money by doing this, and we are helping a lot of people, and the ripple effect of our work is, I mean, I don't want to go all Michael Jackson of like changing the world, but it's creating a ripple effect. Yeah,
it's enormous. It's enormous. It's so, I love it because it's so rebellious and so revolutionary, particularly to be a visible, like to be visibly a mum, to be visibly somebody with a disability or a chronic health condition, to visibly like be married to another woman, to visibly be these different things that don't fit into societal things, and to make money while you do it. Like, that's so, we tend to be like, I don't know, there's sometimes people like, we talk a lot with my clients about how rebellious that is, because often clients feel like they are almost like, oh, but if I'm selling out if I become one of those people making money. And I'm like, you are doing the opposite. Like, you are doing the opposite, because that's not what people want. Like, or I should say, it's not what society wants. It's not what the structures have been created to keep in place. Like, the more of us, like, you know, show visibly mumming, not shoving your kid in the background. I think lockdown really changed this. Like, but it did used to be like, oh my God, if anyone hears that there's children in the background, like, what's that about?
And I think it revealed it to a lot of companies of what actually has gone on before that person steps through the door at 9 a.m. I often think that even, you know, I was talking to a friend the other day, that you think that just taking children to school in the morning, like it's a lovely sunny moment, and sometimes they just cry all the way, or they don't want to go, or and I think 2020, it really, and onwards, it's really opened up, and it does feel like everything feels a bit scattered, and you know when you drop a bottle of olive oil or something, and you're like, oh, it's just a little bit, and you're like, oh no, it's gone under the kitchen cupboards, I've got to take the whole thing out, this is a nightmare. And I feel like work and business and everything is a bit, right, we've got to come back to doing this. So it's
definitely in a time of flux. I would say a lot of that stuff, like this stuff is still new, it's still quite like young in its like in its journey, I guess, in the world, and we're still figuring a lot of that out.
Yes, and we're actively experimenting online, and I think there's a lot of permission around that, of saying, and I guess I've had to tap into who I am as a mum and who I would be with any child. You know, I'm not going to say, why didn't you get that straight away, why did that not work perfectly? Come on, I would never parent in the way. And giving that grace to myself has been quite the process. In terms of where you're going next, and now you have this momentum, what new shifts, cushions, structure adjustments has been needed to support you in this next stage of growth?
So it's really interesting that you talk about that, because I've been talking a lot about this like in my programs behind closed doors, but for the last couple of years, really, I think like a lot of people in the online space, the online coaching space, 2020, despite what the fears were in like February, March of 2020, was a real boom year for my business.
Me too.
And it was kind of like amazing and overwhelming. And then mid 2021, I was like, oh, this is not the same. This is not, I'm not sustaining this. I know some people did, but I obviously don't have the structures in place. And I think I was a bit burnt out for quite a while. And for a long time, I'd look into the future of my business, which used to be like technicolor. I'd be like, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. And I was like, just felt so big, and like, there's so many possibilities. And that was a real thing that I love the feeling of potential. Like it's one of my, I always describe as my favorite emotion, like the feeling of potential. And I really lost that feeling of potential. And I adore coaching. Like you can plonk me in any room and I'm coaching anyway. Like I love it. Like some of my colleagues and stuff, they're like, you know, coaching for now, but I don't see myself doing that like forever. I see myself coaching forever. Like I just love it. And I couldn't see ahead. It was just like dark, like a dark room for a long time. And so it's only, and I think what happened as a result of that was, I think what really happened was, as my income, like I'm a money coach, and my income dropped. And like we were just saying, we wouldn't say to our kids or to clients, like if my client comes to me and goes, oh, my income's dropped, I don't go, oh my God, you piece of shit, what is wrong with you? What? Like, I thought you were good at this. Like, that's not, but it can be how I treat myself in that situation. Like, how are you, like, you are a hypocrite, blah, 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 blah. So it definitely kicked off a lot of feelings. And and I know this because it's what I teach all the time, when we have a lot of feelings going up, it's hard for us to make a pragmatic, logical plan. And so it's not surprising to me that and essentially it was a lot of trauma and a lot of healing that needed to be done, that I couldn't see the future particularly. And it's only in the last 6 months, I would say. I've also had a lot of stuff go on this year. So people that follow will know my dad was diagnosed with cancer in November last year. He died in June. So there was also that kicking off alongside everything else, and had quite a complicated relationship with him. So that's like makes it easier and not easier at the same time. Like it's a complicated thing. So it's only in the last few months that I've gone, wait a minute, I see my business again. I see what I need to do. And what's super interesting to me, and also nice because it just backs up what I teach. It's always nice when you're like, oh, phew, I teach that.
I was right, thank God.
Is as my feelings have become less tangled up in me, and as I'm able to separate my business from my emotions, I can see the steps for my business that are very practical, pragmatic steps.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Yes. That you're building a relationship with your business,
yes,
rather than being like, la 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 la, I've got to put a wash on. You know, and that's the double-edged sword of being able to work from home, being able to work flexibly. That I was saying to my partner, for the last 8 years, I felt like all tabs have been open at all times. And if somebody had seen my desktop version of my brain, they'd be like, this needs a software update. This is something that's happened. And of course, when my daughter went to school, the second week I got the lurgy, was gifted 2 days in bed. And it was exactly what I needed, because you have to slowly rework how this is going to go and go forward. And yes, I think that's something else that's not mentioned alongside business and this outward positivity and abundant life living, that sometimes we have very real stuff going on behind the scenes that are completely and utterly separate from our business and require a very different version of ourselves.
Yeah, but we make it about, we just really conflate the two so heavily. So it'll be like something like for example, you might launch a product and it doesn't sell well, and rather than going, okay, pragmatically, what went wrong there, or what was off with my messaging, or whatever it was, and maybe what was off, like, did I really not believe in that, was there issues in that, we tend to go, oh my god, I'm so bad at this, no one ever likes what I do. And then we spend all that time blaming ourselves, like kind of, and this sounds a bit mean, but like nasal gazing a little bit, and then we don't actually address the issue. So one of the big things for me has been realizing how much I've run my business, and this makes lots of sense with how my business took off. I've run my business off of my own energy rather than, so that means if I'm on it, if I'm loving it, if I'm all sparky, then it's going well. If I'm tired, if my dad's got cancer and he's dying, if whatever's going on, my business is not running in the same way. And so one of the big things that I'm focusing on, I've got a whole investment plan for January, well, probably from December onwards, that's going to be like, right, it's this, then it's this, and it's this. So it's like messaging, then it's funnels, then it's the clearest I've ever been on my business. And as I say that, it feels quite a vulnerable thing to admit, because it's like 7 years in, there's a big part of me that was like, Ray,
you didn't have 2 sides of A4 with a business plan when you first started.
But I know that I lead from experience. So I know that often I go through the thing in order to be able to teach about the thing. And secondly, I just trust that we all have different things, all have different shit we need to work out. And this was mine.
And it took that moment where I learn by doing, I learn by feeling, and that sometimes looks complicated or chaotic to other people, but I know that I'll get to that moment much quicker, where I'm like, I'm in, I've got it. It's those, I always talk about it in yoga, is that a great teacher can look and go, she's got quite short legs, in a non-judgmental way, but she might like, you just need to move your back foot in. And I'm like, oh, okay, I've got it. Right. I'm in the groove. And I have that very intuitive moment with my energy. And sparky is one of my words as well, of like, I love it when I'm in that moment, but when I'm not, I just want to stick my head under a duvet and watch Grand Designs for a fortnight.
Yeah, I'm the same, but it's Grey's Anatomy.
So in terms of your Plenty program, what's on people's wish lists when they're like, I need help with this? What are they looking for?
I think often there's a general squirminess around money. Like, obviously the obvious answer is I want to make more money, but a lot of my clients feel actually quite weird about that. Like they maybe even encountering my sort of free work is the first time they're like, I think I want to make more money actually, and maybe is that all right? So they're kind of often in that sort of space, or like particularly for Plenty, like sometimes like people working with me one-to-one and stuff, they're making quite a bit of money already, but they want to do it in a way that isn't gonna like exhaust them, and like they're like, how am I going to do this without just like selling my soul? But yeah, people are often like, they want to figure out how to feel good about making money, like, and how they can honor their values particularly, and like their personality quirks and all of that stuff, and still get to make the sort of money that allows them to live well. So I don't talk about like making 6 figures or anything like that. I talk about the fact that I've done that, because I think it's really important to hear that people, like, that's possible for us. But I don't say join Plenty and you'll make this amount of money, but I do talk about making life. Yeah, exactly. In an hour, give me an hour. But I do
Let's
talk
do this
about
webinar template.
But I do talk about making life-changing amounts of money, because I think, and I talk about in Plenty the fact that sometimes that looks huge, and sometimes it's like, if my car breaks down, I'm not gonna have to worry about it. If I need a new fridge, it's no big deal. Like those things like that, like being able to breathe in that way is incredibly is life-changing. And there are like the vast majority of people listening, and I would say this about, like, this is true nearly all the time, are undercharging. Like most people are undercharging. And so it's not even huge, like, oh, you're going to need this funnel and you're going to need this like system. And a lot of the time it's like clearing up your very sort of, I don't want to use the word messy, but like squirmy, frenetic feelings around money.
It's like so that dust you get, like, I can see it here. The dust near the skirting board, you know, when it's kind of like, oh, I need a hoover here. And then once it's done, you feel like, okay, great, I've got my life in check.
Exactly. It's just like this squirmy feeling that we get. It also reminds me of, like, you know, I have a cleaner. Even though we've got quite a small house, I have a cleaner. And one of the reasons that we have that cleaner is because I'm good at tidying, but I'm terrible at cleaning. But I'm really good at feeling guilty about not cleaning. So I'll just spend all my life being like, oh, that corner's so gross, and do nothing about it. And just like really beat myself up about it. But when you have a cleaner, it's like, oh, it's just gone. That feeling of like, I never do it. And so it's just that thing of like having to like, and I don't do that for you, but I'm alongside you as you do it, like cleaning that up so that you know what you think about money, and you're no longer running on what everyone else tells you you're supposed to think or anything like that. You can trust what you know to be true for you in your own circumstances, and make money from that place creates just a much happier human, but B, someone who makes more money, because they're not so conflicted, and they're not sort of running on these conflicting beliefs or commitments that often come up, where we both want to pay our bills and provide for our family and not be a rich arsehole. And not be a massive dickhead and not manipulate people. And when we believe that people who make money do those things, we subconsciously either curb ourselves or stop ourselves just showing up and being ourselves and welcoming in the money around that. It doesn't have to be such a big deal.
And what you said about life-changing money for very real everyday things, that's in complete contrast to what we see in terms of this coaching world of, I mean, I haven't got the core strength for Louboutin shoes, so I would only be wearing them lying down, if you know what I mean. But when people show huge closets or all of those sorts of things, I think that's a very patriarchal thing. I mean, unless it's like that's what your thing, you know, your thing is about that. But it's not just making money for women is not just about being able to look even nicer or more polished or be more desirable to a man. You know, one of my things at the moment is I want to really invest in some excellent loungewear and like not look like a complete scruff bag. And even if I'm not wearing a bra, like it's not like, oh, you know, when you just like see a bad mum with a fag and slippers and leggings, like I don't want to be that version, even though that's the inner version. But one thing I can bring to the table in this, because I think sometimes, you know, it's good to have these examples. One of the things that came up when I was thinking about how this might apply to me, sorry, my tabs are opening up, is because I trained as an actor, I had that running belief of it being you're working or you're not, you're in or you're out, you're in flavor, you're in season or you're not. And what I found was that I'd have really, really excellent months. And then I felt like I was kind of starting again and going, oh gosh, right, I've now got to find the next thing. And that meant that I didn't put things in place because, and again, my energy worked in a weird way where I felt like I was jumping around or like scrabbling and going at zero and starting from the beginning. But now I've changed that to, I can welcome everyday sales. People can pay me each and every day should they want to. I am available for that. And it's honestly changed my life because it's changed the way that I look at my emails in the morning because I'm like, oh, I wonder if something great's going to happen. It's boosted my creativity. Like, oh, I haven't said anything about that for a while. Right, I'm going to put that out there. And yet, as we talked about these layers of healing, I still have a bit of a starving artist thing. Like, how dare I do what I love so much and get paid so well?
Yeah. And I think that's one of the big things as well, isn't it? Is one of the big conditionings is that making money has to be hard work. And if it's not hard work, either you are entitled and you're having it too easy, or you're lazy and you're not going to get it. And so that's the other thing with some stuff like that, where we actually keep it hard work for ourselves, because that's our brain's very comfortable and believes that's what creates not just money, but like legitimate money, like well-earned money. And so we don't want to do things like you've just described of like, well, what if I made money every day? Like our subconscious is like, well, that would make it easier. And that is either ethically wrong or literally will lead you, like in our brain, we're like, yeah, but hard work's what makes money. So we can't make it easier for ourselves. So, and then, starving artists, my God. I mean, all industries have their money stuff. Like they really do. It's the charity sector, sweet Lord, huge money stuff goes on in there. Like all different, like loads and loads. Coaching, therapy, actors, therapists.
We're just lucky to be here, you artists. Know. Like I had that for so many years because I couldn't believe that I had left my town and actually done it, because I didn't know any actors when I mean, this was a silly move, really. I'd never met an actor who actually had made any money from acting before I became one. So I was the first person essentially that I met, which was odd and weird to talk about yourself in that way. But I spent the first couple of years absolutely blown away the fact that I'd done what I'd set out to do. Like I couldn't believe I'd made it. I was like, it was I left and then, of course, you know, I'd get so blown away the fact that people were like, we can't pay you, but we can give you a sandwich and a cup of tea. I was like, oh my God, thanks so much. And then I was like, I'm not even going to ask what kind of sandwich is. And then you'd be like, oh no, it's egg, but it's a free sandwich. Fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And I think that's as well what you're describing is like a microcosm of the like general experience of so many women. Of like, I'm so lucky to be here. Like I spent, and mums is a good example. Like, oh my God, I get a job that I can work around my children. I'm so lucky. I don't need to charge more. What about all these people that are struggling? And I'm just empathizing with their situation. And somehow my head thinks that if I earn less, it'll somehow that money will magically go to them, which it absolutely doesn't. And so we just find ourselves in this loop of just so grateful for little us to have got a seat at the table, when actually like that's bullshit. It's just like, and it's and also if we're honest, we're struggling money wise, or we're certainly not living. And I have this thing that I believe that people are like, there's no better way for me to describe it that I've found other than like people have almost like an energetic match for money. It's not like, and if we see money as neutral, so it's not a moral thing, it's not an ethical thing, it just is, that different people's lives and beings fit better when they're making a certain amount of money, and that amount of money is different depending on the person. So for some people that might be 50 grand, and some people it might be millions, and neither of those is better or worse. It just is just a bit like, you know, certainly like in some relationships it's just like a good match of the two people. Like it's not that person's like the better human, it's just that the two of you complement each other for whatever reason.
It's like when people say, oh, this is the best husband in the world, or the best mum in the world, or whatever. And it's like, no, just in your family. It's not a competition. We don't have to. And also going to be a wrestling match of the best husband.
But also then they'll describe stuff that I'm like, oh, that sounds awful. Like they do that.
And isn't it funny, once you do that work of being really intuitive, like you were saying about where you need to go in terms of systems and really feeling into it, I become so like, oh, it's this or it's that. Oh, no, it's not that. And I'm quite abrupt in my house of like, oh, no, Do you want this for dinner? No. I was like, oh, and then again, oh, I should be grateful somebody's cooking me dinner. But
Exactly,
yes.
exactly. And I was talking about this in a live this morning. Like, we have to remember that particularly women are conditioned from early on that some of our most basic desires are not to be trusted. And by basic desires, I mean eating. Like, we are told from early that we should, like, and I grew up in the 90s, as I know you did as well. Like, I grew up in the 90s where it was like there was a different diet every week that you could go on. Like, there's a comedian that talks about how we were convinced that if you only ate, like, I can't remember how much Special K it was, that you'd go down a dress size. Like, I used to go to sleep early because I was so hungry.
Yes.
And I was like, well, I'm not hungry, I'm just bored. I'm like, that's what it is. So I'll just go to sleep so that I can, and like, so we're not trusting our most basic desires, and then sexually as well, that would make us slutty or whatever it is. And so that then feeds into what we want elsewhere. Because if we can't trust basic desires, if we're always wrong about those, like, I don't even know how much food I'm meant to eat. I'm such a silly little woman. I can't work out how hungry I am. It just makes me fat if I want to eat that much. So I must be wrong. Yes. What does that say about my other desires in my life?
Yes. And so you also then get that feedback. Well, certainly I did, of when I got really thin, it gave me great results.
Yeah.
Read into that what you will, ladies and gents. But again, and then of course you're like, I'm so thin now, I'm like beside myself with exhaustion and all.
I'm literally like, so like, I really can literally feel it now, like the lightheadedness, which was its own kind of high, but just feeling like, oh, I'm doing really well because I feel really spacey.
Yeah. I fell off a chair in English once because I hadn't eaten breakfast. I mean, I joke, but I'm just like, but I like that feeling. Oh God, yeah, awful. But
it's the same thing. Like, when I grew up, it was like you didn't even trust yourself to fully take a full breath.
No,
because or you wouldn't sit in certain ways because it makes your thighs big. Those very like insidious ways in which we're taught that we cannot trust what we have or what we want or what we need. That then feeds into, and so clear with money, I'm just being greedy, wanting more. I'm just being greedy. I don't need that. I don't need to not feel lightheaded. I don't need to be able to stay sat on a stool. Like, I don't need that. There's no suggestion I hope it's changing, but certainly in the 80s, 90s, 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s culture, that there were just different bodies.
Yes.
With different needs. Yeah. And that could be true. And it's the same with money. It's like, either you are a good person, and this is another thing that relates to diet culture, but it also relates to savings. Like, notice when people talk about being good with money or good with food, they mean restrictive. They mean
and all those quizzes in magazines. I remember they used to do those budgets of like how much you spend on your petrol and your groceries, and then there'll be somebody who is saying, well done, Wendy, you did you've really got a grip on your finances, excellent stuff. And it's like, but we're not seeing what Wendy is like. Nobody's talking to Wendy about how she could actually make more money, so she wouldn't have to go, phew, £37 of petrol, not a penny over. That sort of, and again, that culture of, don't have your coffee in the morning because £3 per day.
Avocados.
All of that sort of stuff. But again, nobody talks to you about investing, where you're going next, what you actually want to spend money on, and so much in there.
And it's because the messaging to women is always hold back, become smaller. The messaging to men is, because men get loads of messaging about investing and being bigger and taking up space, and women's is, you're better the more you shrink. So women's stuff is about budgeting and couponing and like all of that stuff. And that's the financial messages. And then if they spend on things like handbags, which by the way are a good investment, they hold their value really well in the same way watches do.
Yes.
And better than lots of cars do.
Yeah.
But people talk about it like, oh God, she's just so vain and she's so this and she's so that, because it's like, when women are taking up more space and are expressing more of what they desire, then they are greedy, spendy, grabby, fat, slutty, all of that stuff. And you can sort of track it through different sort of sections of society. So it's really interesting, that thing of like owning what you want being a far more complicated thing to navigate.
Yes.
For a lot of women. I will say you can, and this is me being, I can be very black and white about things. My favorite thing to do with those societal expectations is, yes, look at them, see them, understand them more, but then also just like fuck them right off.
Yes.
And just be like, actually, do you know what? I'm just opting out.
Yeah.
I just not gonna.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
that is the simplest route.
Totally. And that you don't have to bare your soul or justify yourself to everybody. I always used to have a thing of like, what do you do then? Oh, you got your fingers in a lot of pies, la la la, you know, can't make your mind up, all of that sort of stuff. And it's like, I'm not criticizing you, Kevin, for what you're doing.
Always Kevin.
Like, I don't need to know about your business. I'm just in the pub. I'm just enjoying my life. You know, we don't need to go there in that way. That's really key about being able to vocalize it and say it. That's a lot of the work that I'm doing with clients at the moment, because again, we're sort of waiting for this perfect time where we'll feel ready, or that we've got the right script in place, we've got the template, like we've really nailed it. And actually, circling back to where we started, it's about showing up as you and saying it in the way that you are. And I did a reel a little while ago of how I made a lot of money wearing a red dressing gown. It's actually in the wash, otherwise I would bring it for the viewers. But this red dressing gown, I was literally with my baby, like selling, talking on the internet and doing that. But
exactly. And I think it is all still such a, like we said earlier, such a new thing. We're figuring this out. And one of the things that I woke up the other day, like literally woke up, and I think I almost said it out loud. I was like, oh, it's doing money differently. Like that, this was my new tagline. It just like came out of me. I must have been dreaming about it or something. And I think I am very big on, and have been for a long time, reimagining a lot of the things that are like, I understand why people feel so put off of money. I understand why they like, because genuine harm is done in the name of money frequently. And it's part of us reimagining how to do this differently, like to do money differently, to do the power that comes with money differently is going to be messy on the way. And often we opt out of it because we're, again, conditioning wise, we're so perfectionist and so worried about being seen not to get things right.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of stuff that's kicked off in the last few years, which has been very necessary, has also kind of like the ethical obsession that it's become, is actually just feeding into a lot of people's conditioning and fears about getting stuff wrong. And we have to be okay and be able to hold messing up other people's opinions and it not actually impacting who we are and what's possible for us. And I say that like I acknowledge that's not easy, but it is so necessary if we're gonna actually like have that ripple effect you were talking about of actually changing the ways in which money is mishandled and treated. People are treated terribly as a consequence of that, but we don't change that by opting out of money.
No. And when we're in this world, like you said, you're going to be coaching for the rest of your life, unless you're cruising or something else, you know, by 50, right? Like just relaxing somewhere. That we have to come back to that sense of, well, we are still doing it. We're on the path. And so what are we going to do? Are we going to turn back and then just say, right, that's it, I can't do this?
Yeah.
Or are we going to find that way through? That book, you know, we're going on a bear hunt. It's not going to be straightforward. Sometimes you have to go through it, under it. And now I have that sort of playfulness of saying, oh, okay, I just got to go a different way. All right, no problem. I've just got to use my imagination here and get curious and ask different questions, because where I want to go, there isn't one specific route.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh God. And I always say this on my podcast as well, like everything works in business and none of it works for somebody. Like everything is working for somebody. When people say to me, and this has happened a lot this year, like the coaching industry is dead, funnels are dead, this is dead, none of that's dead. It's all working for somebody somewhere, and it's all not working for somebody else. It's about figuring out what works best for you, and that's messy.
Yes. Yes,
It is.
yes, yes. And that's why everything I offer, I have two versions, because some people just want to sit in their red dressing gown and do the work. And some people are like, that online course that I bought from you, I'm never going to do it, by the way.
Yeah.
I've not even opened it. So what I need to do is see you in real life, and then we'll do it together. And even if I have to pay twice, and there's that moment sometimes.
Yeah.
We'll do that.
Yeah.
So Plenty, when is it? It's open. Is it open at the moment?
It is open. It is open. I'm like,
while this goes out. Yes,
it is. Yeah. So I believe, let me double check because I've got the page up. I'm pretty sure it's open until the 19th of October.
Great.
And yeah, I'm pretty sure that's true. And it is just like, it's like the most glorious thing I've made in so many ways. Like there's so many parts of what I do that I love. Depends on the day. Depends on the day. But in terms of my work, but it's a lifetime access course, so people join because money is not. I used to run it and it would be, I think it used to be like anywhere between 8 and 12 weeks is what I'd run it in the past. I always wanted to do it so that people joined and then they were just in it. But I'd worked with coaches who were like, you can't do that. Nobody will buy from you. You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to do that. And then I started to see it being more done and was like, damn it, that's how I always wanted to do Plenty. And now it's become a thing and I could have been ahead of the game.
Yes.
So I
could have invented this.
Yeah. So I opened it up so people pay their amount, but once they're in, they're in. So it's lifetime access of the course. I always want to say, like, some people are like, I thought I'd have this till I die. Like, I don't imagine myself not running it anytime soon.
Yeah.
But once you're in, and you get weekly coaching calls. There's a whole curriculum that moves you through building powerful money beliefs and deconditioning your brain, and then moving into what we've been talking about, which is like experiments and messy action to like really build the evidence that we call it being a creator of money in the program. And there's lives from me and all that stuff, but it's really at its heart this just beautiful community where people can come and be honest about what they want, where they're wobbling, the questions they need answering, all of that stuff. Like, we're not a community where you'll ever hear like, well, that's just your money blocks getting in the way of you. Like,
limiting beliefs.
We listen to what's going on, and like I said, it always makes sense. But I've just done this 5 days of lives on Instagram about all of this stuff, and one of my favorite days was talking about community and the fact that our feelings about money they don't come from individuals, they come from systems. And so the solution is not an individual solution. It's sort of community work is such an important thing, because you get to see other people grappling with this stuff, and you get to, one of my favorite things is the way somebody will say, when you said this, it made me realize this. And then someone else is like, oh my God, that's the same for me too. And they wouldn't have got there, maybe ever, but certainly for a while, without hearing that person express what they're going through. It's one of my favorite things about group coaching generally.
When you're in that mindset of, I haven't done it right, I've done it wrong, it takes you back to that inner 5-year-old, like almost being left in the classroom to finish your work because you didn't write it quick enough, or you didn't eat your lunch quick enough, and all those shameful things. And then somebody going, it's all right, I didn't finish my work either, so I'm going to sit on the next table. And you're like, and we need this in adult life as well.
Totally. And money is so full of shame, and for so many people in so many different ways. And just to hear like other people going through that stuff, as well as the other supportive things. But I always say to people, like, if all you did was get in a room with all these people and talk honestly and openly about money, how you feel about money would change. And that's not all we do in Plenty, but I can guarantee the results literally just off the back of that element. And then we do lots of other stuff as well that really supports all of that. But it's just incredible and it feels like an incredible privilege on my part as well to just be part of those calls and to be facilitating them, and just hearing these amazing people come together and share where they're at.
Place to say, bloody hell, I made all this money, how fantastic.
Yes, exactly.
And
so we talk about
what are you going to do with it? What did you do? Go on a quiz show or something?
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is it. So what we'll do is, someone comes in and they're like, it worked. Like, we just have one beautiful person who was really struggling, like about a year ago, I think. They were really struggling. They launched a couple of things and they didn't work. Then not in the business space. They're in like more of a what they do is stuff based around nature. And they're now charging like well for it and all of that stuff. and it's worked. They've had an amazing launch this time. And so I was like, what did you do? Like, tell everybody, what did you do? Like, what happened? Like, because we know that you were here because you were bringing those struggles to the group, and now you're here. So there's also that, like, whenever someone's like, this worked, I'm like, tell us what happened, share that with the group. And I am honest, like I'm unfiltered it's a problem. So you're always also going to hear the background of what's going on for me as well. Like, I try and be as honest and really do the leading from alongside people, rather than it being this, I'm very into trying to dismantle the power structures around money and stuff. So it's all very much like that perspective with things as well.
I love it with the nature thing. Turns out money does grow on trees.
I know, but it's this thing that people say all the time. They're like, oh, but only business coaches make money and blah, 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 blah. There was a time when my top earner was a farmer. Like, it is not true. It is not true. And it's such an unhelpful belief that people hold. So I always like to point out when I've got people like really smashing it who are in a cost of living crisis, people are buying nature stuff, not just how do I make more money stuff.
Totally. And you know, all of the shit that everybody bought in the pandemic because they wanted, you know, to do stuff. And also all the great stuff as well.
Yes.
Obviously. Where can people find you? How can they sign up for Plenty and join the community and make loads of money?
Make loads of money. So it's the best place to find me is generally either on Instagram. I'm Ray _Dodd on Instagram. Or on my newsletter, which you can find via my Instagram, but my website is raydodd.co.uk. And that's where I spend most of my time. I've just resurrected my Facebook group as well. That's called the Moneymakers Community, which I closed a while ago. But I just think that we need private, I mean, I say private spaces, it's 2,500 people, but, you know, more private spaces to talk about money and safe spaces. And I think that Instagram doesn't quite let us do that because we're aware everything we're saying is seen.
Totally.
So I've brought that
places
back.
Where you can have a bit of a sign saying no knobheads, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Sort of, and your podcast as well.
Yes, and my podcast. God, there's all sorts going on.
I want to be pageant mum then. Come on, Ray. Come on.
That is called Real You, Real Money, and comes out every week on a Wednesday or Thursday generally.
Amazing. Well, thank you. I have loved this chat. I'm going to go and make loads of money. I'm going to have a nice lunch and I'm going to live my best life. But no, I'm such an admirer of your work. And it's just been so brilliant to chat with you today. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you haven't already, feel free to rate, review, and subscribe for all the brand new episodes. If you want to go deeper with my support, check out my freebies house and unlock the rooms you choose. nickyraby.com/freebies house. I also have workshops, programs, and one-on-one bespoke offerings. For prices, availability, or just to have a chat with me, go to nickyraby.com. Thank you, as always, for spending some time with me and my guests, and I'll see you next time.